Tonight, my children, I will tell you the story of a prophet of courage, a shepherd who stood before kings, and the miraculous journey of a people guided by faith. It began when Pharaoh woke up in a cold sweat, tormented by a troubled dream of a Hebrew child who would threaten his throne. Under a dark, candlelit night, a newborn Hebrew boy was born into a world of chains. Egyptian soldiers marched through the streets at night, carrying torches and searching for newborn boys. Moses' mother Jochebed sat in her humble home in extreme fear as the guards passed by her window. To save her baby, Jochebed prepared a wicker basket, sealing it carefully with pitch. She placed her heart's treasure inside the basket and set it adrift upon the great Nile. At sunrise, the basket floated down the river as his mother wept on the shore. She placed the baby in the river among the papyrus reeds, hoping for a miracle. The tiny basket drifted safely through the water, nestled among pink lotus flowers. His brave sister Miriam watched closely from behind the reeds to see where the river would take him. She hid in the papyrus, her heart full of prayer for her baby brother. At home, Jochebed prayed by the window through the dark night, begging for his safety. Downriver, the princess of Egypt descended to bathe and discovered the wicker basket. The royal princess found the child, her face filled with wonder and delight. She pulled the crying baby from the Nile and decided to keep him as her own. Raised in the royal palace, Moses was brought up surrounded by Egyptian luxury. In the palace gardens, a rocking horse and golden rattle marked his royal childhood. He grew up as a prince of Egypt with the world at his feet, playing with royal toys. But after standing up for his oppressed brethren, Moses fled to the wrath of Egypt into Midian. He arrived at an oasis well in Midian, helping Jethro's daughters water their flocks of sheep. 4 years, Moses lived a simple life of peace, harvesting dates in the quiet oasis. But a divine calling came, and a deep desert canyon at night, a bush began to glow with light. The vibrant green bush was engulfed in flames, but was not consumed by the fire. God showed him miracles, transforming his wooden staff into a glowing green serpent. With his mission clear, Moses returned to Egypt, entering the fortified city of Ramesses. He sailed on a majestic Egyptian galley past the pyramids to confront Pharaoh. He stood before Pharaoh sitting on his golden throne, surrounded by guards. Pharaoh boastfully proclaimed his absolute power, refusing to let the people go. But Moses stood firm, repeating the command of his Lord, "Let my people go." To prove his power, Moses cast down his staff, and it became a giant living serpent before the court. Pharaoh's magicians fell to their knees as Moses' serpent swallowed their staffs whole. When Pharaoh hardened his heart, plague struck. The Nile turned to blood, filling the banks with red water. An Egyptian galley sailed on the blood-red river as fish leaped in distress. Next came the frogs, overrunning Pharaoh's banquet halls and causing chaos. Thousands of jumping frogs covered the palace courtyards, disgusting the royal court. A plague of fire and hail followed, lightning striking the great Egyptian monuments at night. Massive hailstones smashed into the golden wheat fields and temple courtyards. Swarms of locusts followed, a dark tornado of insects blotting out the pyramids. The locusts devoured every green leaf, leaving the empire stripped of its pride. Finally, the 10th plague struck. An Egyptian mother wept in a dark room over her firstborn child. Across Egypt, people knelt in deep mourning by torchlight near the pyramids. Pharaoh finally surrendered, and the exodus began as the Israelites marched under a starry night. They camped in a vast desert valley, hundreds of white tents pitched under a crescent moon. But Pharaoh quickly regretted their release, seeing the massive pillar of fire in the night sky. Enraged, Pharaoh pointed toward the desert, ordering his armies to pursue them. He led his armored army and golden chariots in hot pursuit across the sand dunes. The Israelites fled into the desert, looking back in terror at the approaching army. They ran with their livestock, urgent and fearful under the scorching sun. They had to move quickly, leaving their temporary marketplaces and settlements behind. Pharaoh's golden chariots kicked up massive dust storms as they closed in on them. The Israelites reached the shore of the Red Sea, realizing they were completely trapped. Faced with the ocean, Moses raised his staff, and the Red Sea parted with a grand miracle. A wide path opened through the sea, illuminated by divine rays breaking through the clouds. The dry sea floor was lined with shells and flanked by towering walls of blue water. The people stood on the dry path in awe, looking at the water walls. A massive crowd of families traveled along the winding sandy path through the sea. They walked happily, seeing colorful coral reefs and exotic fish inside the translucent water. They ran with determination, leaving deep footprints in the wet sand as the storm rolled in. They fled for their lives as the turbulent water walls towered high above them under the lightning sky. Terrified families hurried through the narrow corridor as thunder shook the heavens. Blinded by wrath, Pharaoh's golden chariots and army charged aggressively into the path. They pursued the Israelites, charging into the dry seabed between the towering water walls. But the path was not for them. As the Israelites stepped onto safety, the walls began to collapse. The sea closed with furious power, swallowing the chariots and soldiers in churning white water. The crashing waves engulfed the Egyptian army, destroying Pharaoh's pride. A wooden chariot was tossed violently in the roaring storm as the elements closed the gap. When the sun rose, the storm had passed. Chariot wreckage washed ashore on the quiet beach. A golden Egyptian crown floated alone on the quiet sea surface at sunset. An empty wooden boat floated in the quiet turquoise water, symbolizing their new beginning. In the desert, a glowing pillar of fire guided the Israelite camp through the cold nights. The towering fire reached the starry heavens, providing light and warmth. It rose from the center of their camp, a constant sign of divine guidance. By day, a massive white pillar of cloud hovered over the camp, shielding them from the sun. When the people cried out in thirst, Moses struck a rock, and fresh water gushed forth. When they were hungry, bread fell from heaven like rain, and quail covered the camp. They joyfully gathered the flaky manna into wicker baskets at sunrise. A large flock of quail descended upon the sandy dunes near their tents. They gathered around their tents, feasting on quail and bread with grateful hearts. On Mount Sinai, Moses received the 10 Commandments carved onto stone tablets. But in his absence, the people lost faith and worshipped a molded golden calf idol. Correcting their path, he built the tabernacle housing the Ark of the Covenant under a beam of light. Inside lay a golden chest, the greatest spiritual treasure of the people. When rebellion rose under Korah, the earth itself opened and swallowed the rebels. God continued to provide for them, filling their coastal travels with abundance. The old structures crumbled, replaced by liquid golden light of a new covenant. The scouts returned from Canaan, carrying a giant cluster of grapes to prove the land's fruitfulness. After 40 years, they stood at the edge of the Promised Land, Oasis Green Valley. Moses left behind a legacy of faith, an eternal sanctuary in the hearts of his people. In a modern living room, the children look on with wide-eyed wonder as the father reads the miracle. The father points to the illustrations of Pharaoh and the pyramids in the storybook. They close the grand book, keeping the lessons of faith alive in their cozy home.